Jamal lived in a small town where every street seemed to look the same. The houses were close together, the trees lined the sidewalks, and the kids in the neighborhood often played outside until the sun went down. But for Jamal, the days didn't feel as bright as they did for the others. He walked with his head low most of the time, trying not to attract attention. People knew him, of course, but few really talked to him. At school, he was the quiet boy. He always sat in the back of the classroom, taking notes, finishing his assignments, and staying out of trouble. The teachers respected him for his discipline, but his classmates rarely included him in their groups. He wasn't loud, he wasn't funny in the way others wanted, and he often felt like he didn't fit in. It was not that he didn't want friends, it was that whenever he tried, something seemed to push people away. He had grown used to being alone. The only friend who never left his side was Buddy, his golden brown dog with floppy ears and a tail that wagged whenever Jamal came home. Jamal had found Buddy as a puppy, abandoned near the park one rainy afternoon. The little dog had been cold, wet, and shivering. Barely able to stand, Jamal picked him up and carried him home under his jacket, whispering promises to keep him safe. From that day forward, they were inseparable. Every morning, Buddy waited at the door as Jamal got ready for school. When he returned in the afternoon, Buddy ran to him, barking happily, spinning in circles as if Jamal had been gone for years instead of hours. They played in the yard, went on long walks, and sometimes simply sat together under the old oak tree behind their house. Buddy listened to Jamal in a way no one else did. When Jamal spoke about his day, his dog tilted his head and stared at him with warm brown eyes, as though he understood every word. Buddy wasn't just a pet, he was Jamal's anchor. In moments when loneliness pressed down, the dog reminded him he was not truly alone. When whispers at school made him feel small, Buddy's wagging tail reminded him he mattered to someone. But there were shadows in Jamal's world, too. A group of boys in the neighborhood often lingered near the park or the street corners. They were older, louder, and always looking for trouble. Jamal knew who they were, everyone did. They weren't part of his school classes, but he crossed paths with them sometimes. Their laughter often carried a sharp edge, and their eyes followed him whenever he walked past. Jamal tried to ignore them. He kept his pace steady, never looking directly at them, and focused on the rhythm of Buddy's paws on the pavement. He told himself that if he didn't respond, if he just kept walking, they would eventually get bored and leave him alone. Still, the unease stayed with him. Every time he saw them leaning against the wall near the convenience store or hanging around the park entrance, his stomach tightened. He would glance at Buddy and remind himself to stay calm. His uncle had always told him, strength is not shown by fighting every battle. Sometimes strength is in walking away. Jamal lived by those words. His uncle was a man of discipline, a former soldier who had traveled to faraway places and learned the value of control. Under his uncle's guidance, Jamal had been training in martial arts since he was 9. The practice gave him balance, precision, and focus. Yet he never flaunted it, never used it to prove anything to anyone. It was his secret, something he carried quietly, a tool of defense and not pride. Most people saw Jamal as the quiet boy who kept to himself. None of them knew he had the power to protect himself if ever needed. He hoped he would never have to show it. One late afternoon, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jamal walked home with Buddy trotting beside him. The air was cool, and the sound of cicadas filled the silence. Buddy sniffed the ground, his ears flicking at every sound. Jamal felt peaceful. It was moments like these that made him forget about school, forget about the whispers, and forget about the shadows that sometimes followed him. As he walked past the old basketball court, he noticed the familiar figures of the group of boys. They were leaning against the fence, laughing among themselves. Jamal's heart skipped, but he kept his eyes forward. He whispered softly to Buddy, "Just keep walking. Don't stop." Buddy's tail wagged, as if encouraging him. The boys didn't move toward him that time, but Jamal could feel their eyes on his back as he walked away. His steps grew faster, his breaths a little sharper. When he finally reached home, Buddy barked once, almost like a cheer, and Jamal laughed softly, the tension easing. Inside his room, Jamal sat on the floor beside Buddy. He stroked his fur, running his fingers through the soft strands. "One day, people will see me differently," he whispered. "But until then, it's just you and me." Buddy licked his hand in response, and Jamal smiled. That night, Jamal dreamt of wide-open spaces where he and Buddy could run freely without worry, without the shadows of others looming nearby. In his dream, Buddy barked joyfully, chasing butterflies across a golden field. Jamal ran beside him, the wind brushing against his face, and for once, everything felt perfect. The next morning, Jamal woke up early. He tied his sneakers, grabbed Buddy's leash, and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets empty except for the chirping of birds. He liked it that way, peaceful, calm, untouched by the noise of others. As he walked, he thought about school again. He knew the day would bring the same routine classes, homework, sitting alone during breaks. But with Buddy at his side, he felt ready. No matter what waited for him, he knew he could face it. For Jamal, the bond with his dog was more than companionship. It was a promise. A promise that no matter what others said, no matter what shadows tried to weigh him down, he had someone who believed in him. And sometimes, one true friend was stronger than 100 voices trying to tear you apart. That morning walk stretched longer than usual. Jamal let Buddy lead the way, watching his dog's happy steps. He thought about how far they had come since that rainy day when he had first found him, small and trembling. Buddy had grown into a strong, loyal companion. And in a way, Jamal felt he had grown too. He didn't know it yet, but soon his world would change. Soon, the quiet boy who walked with his dog would be forced to show the strength he had kept hidden for so long. But for now, as the sun rose higher and the streets filled with the light of a new day, Jamal just walked. He walked with Buddy, side by side, two friends against the world. The days at school passed in the same rhythm for Jamal. He walked the halls quietly, turned in his work on time, and left without speaking much. Some classmates respected his silence, while others mistook it for weakness. Jamal didn't bother to correct them. He knew who he was, and he knew what his uncle had taught him. But even with his calm nature, there were moments when loneliness settled deep in his chest. Buddy was always the cure. Every afternoon when Jamal returned home, the golden brown dog came running, tail wagging so fast it looked like it might lift him off the ground. No matter how heavy the day felt, Buddy's joy made the weight disappear. Jamal often thought, as long as I have him, I'll be all right. But the world outside their home didn't always allow peace. The group of older boys who lingered around the neighborhood grew bolder with time. They weren't just loud anymore, they had begun to take notice of Jamal in ways that made his steps quicken whenever he passed by. At first it was words, snide remarks tossed into the air like stones, never landing directly on him but close enough to sting. Jamal had learned to keep his face blank, his eyes steady on the path ahead. He never answered, never gave them the reaction they wanted. Yet their laughter always followed him. One Friday afternoon, Jamal left school feeling lighter than usual. A teacher had praised his essay, and for once he felt like his voice had been heard. He hurried home, eager to share the good news with Buddy. As expected, Buddy greeted him at the door, bouncing with excitement. "I got the best grade today," Jamal whispered into his dog's ear as he hugged him. Buddy barked as if celebrating too. They decided to take a walk before dinner. The sun was still warm, painting the streets gold. Jamal let Buddy lead the way, the leash loose in his hand. The dog sniffed curiously at flowers and grass, pausing now and then to wag his tail at passing neighbors. They reached the park, where the basketball court stood quiet. The sound of a bouncing ball echoed, followed by laughter. Jamal's chest tightened. He knew that sound. The group of boys was there, gathered near the fence. There were 4 of them today. They were older, taller, and carried themselves with the careless confidence of those who believed no one could challenge them. Jamal's steps slowed. His instinct told him to turn around, to take another path home, but Buddy tugged forward, eager to continue their usual walk. Jamal swallowed hard. "It's fine," he whispered to himself. "Just keep walking. Don't stop." He kept his eyes on the ground as they drew closer. He could hear the boys laughing, their voices growing louder. One of them noticed him first. "Well, look who's here," the voice called out. The others turned. Jamal's heartbeat quickened, but he forced himself to keep moving. He focused on Buddy, who trotted happily, unaware of the tension building in the air. "Hey, quiet boy," another shouted. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" Jamal's steps didn't falter. He told himself not to answer, not to react. His uncle's words echoed in his head, "Walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're stronger than the fight." But the boys weren't content with being ignored. One of them stepped forward, blocking part of the sidewalk. Jamal felt his stomach knot, but he adjusted his grip on Buddy's leash and walked around. For a moment, he thought that might be enough, that maybe they would laugh and let him go. Then it happened. One of the boys whistled loudly, drawing Buddy's attention. Curious, the dog tilted his head. Before Jamal could tighten the leash, another boy rushed forward, lifting his foot and stomping down near Buddy's side. The sound made Jamal freeze. Buddy yelped, stumbling back with a whimper, his tail tucking under. The laughter from the boys rang out sharp and cruel, filling the air. Jamal dropped to his knees beside his dog, his hands moving quickly to check if Buddy was hurt. His heart raced as he stroked the golden fur, whispering, "It's okay, boy, it's okay, I'm here." Buddy licked his hand, trembling but alive. Relief mixed with a surge of something Jamal rarely allowed himself to feel: anger. The boys' laughter grew louder. One of them mocked, "Look at him. Crying over a dog." Another added, "Maybe the dog's tougher than him." Jamal clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe steadily. His uncle's training taught him control above all else. But control felt like a fragile thread in that moment, stretched thin by the sight of Buddy's pain. He stood slowly, his eyes finally lifting to meet theirs. His silence, once a shield, now felt different. The boys faltered slightly at the look on his face, but quickly covered it with more laughter. "What's the matter?" one sneered. "You gonna do something about it?" Jamal didn't answer. He adjusted Buddy's leash gently, making sure his dog was steady on his paws. Inside, though, something shifted. For years he had walked away, choosing peace over conflict, control over reaction. But this time, they hadn't just mocked him, they had hurt the one soul who never left his side. The leash felt heavy in his hand, not because of Buddy's weight, but because of the decision pressing down on him. He could hear his uncle's voice again, calm and steady, "Your strength is not for showing off. It is for protecting. For defending what matters." Buddy whimpered softly, leaning against Jamal's leg. The sound cut deeper than any insult. Jamal's breathing slowed. His body stilled, his mind focusing in the way it always did during training. The park around him seemed quieter, the laughter of the boys fading as his senses sharpened. He didn't need to speak. His silence spoke for him. The boys exchanged glances, their smiles twitching with unease. They had expected him to cower, to rush away. Instead, he stood tall, his posture steady, his gaze unflinching. For the first time, they saw something in him they hadn't before. Not weakness. Not silence. But fire. The air felt heavier, charged with a tension none of them could laugh away. Buddy pressed closer to Jamal, as if knowing his friend was on the edge of something important. Jamal knew this was not the end. The line had been crossed. And soon, very soon, they would discover who he truly was. The laughter of the boys still echoed in the park, but it no longer carried the same sharpness. Jamal stood still, his hand resting gently on Buddy's head. The dog's breathing had steadied, though he leaned against Jamal as if for reassurance. Jamal's eyes didn't leave the boys. His silence stretched, and in that silence, something shifted in the air. The group exchanged uneasy looks. They had expected him to grab his dog and run. They had expected tears, anger, or fear. What they saw instead was calm, too calm. Jamal's posture was steady, his face expressionless, his gaze unflinching. "Why are you just staring?" one of them said, trying to sound bold, but his voice carried a hint of nervousness. Jamal didn't answer. His uncle's training rose in his mind like a tide. He remembered the countless hours in the backyard, repeating stances, practicing strikes, learning to breathe with focus. He remembered his uncle's steady words, "The first battle is with yourself. Control your fear. Control your anger. Then you can control the fight." And in that moment, Jamal wasn't afraid. One of the boys, frustrated by his silence, stepped closer. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" He reached out as if to shove Jamal's shoulder. Jamal moved. It was not a wild swing, not a desperate reaction. It was clean, sharp, and precise, the kind of movement born of discipline. He sidestepped, his hand deflecting the shove with practiced ease, and in the same motion he shifted his weight, using the boy's momentum to send him stumbling off balance. The others blinked in shock. The boy who had tried to push him landed awkwardly, his feet tangling beneath him as he fell to the ground. "Hey!" another shouted, stepping forward. "What was that?" Jamal's heart thudded, but his breathing was steady. His uncle's voice echoed again, "Never strike first. But if you must defend, do it with precision." The second boy lunged at him, fists raised. Jamal sidestepped again, his body moving as smoothly as water. He ducked low, sweeping his leg in a motion that caught the other off guard. The boy's balance broke, and he stumbled forward, landing hard on his hands and knees. Buddy barked sharply, tail bristling, as if cheering his friend on. Now the group wasn't laughing. Their expressions shifted from amusement to disbelief. "What's going on?" one whispered. Jamal straightened, his eyes still calm. He didn't speak, but his silence was louder than any words. The tallest of the group clenched his fists. "You think you're tough, hey?" He charged forward, swinging wildly. This time Jamal didn't move away. He stepped in. His training guided him: block, redirect, strike. His arm rose, deflecting the punch with his forearm, while his other hand pressed sharply into the boy's chest, sending him staggering backward with a gasp. It wasn't brute force, it was control, the kind of controlled strength his uncle had drilled into him. The boy stumbled, eyes wide. What was that?" The fourth boy hesitated. He looked at his friends, sprawled and stunned, then at Jamal, who stood tall with Buddy at his side. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his face. Jamal's breathing slowed again. He adjusted his stance, feet planted firmly on the ground, ready for whatever came next. Inside, his mind was calm. Years of quiet training had shaped him for this moment, not for glory, not for pride, but for defense. The boys had thought he was weak. They had thought silence meant fear. But now they saw the truth: his silence was discipline, his stillness was power. The one who had fallen first scrambled to his feet, his pride burning hotter than his pain. "You're gonna regret this," he spat, though his voice shook. He tried to charge again, but the tallest boy held him back. "Wait," the tall one muttered, still rubbing his chest where Jamal's strike had landed. "He's not what we thought." The others froze. For a moment, none of them knew what to do. The confidence that had fueled their cruelty drained away, replaced by unease. Jamal didn't chase them, didn't taunt them, didn't even raise his fists. He simply stood there, calm, steady, ready. His uncle's words returned once more, "A fighter is not one who starts fights. A fighter is one who ends them." The park was quiet except for Buddy's low growl. The boys, once bold and mocking, now looked at each other nervously. One by one, they stepped back. The tall one gave Jamal a long look, his expression caught between anger and respect. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The others followed, muttering under their breath but careful not to look back. Jamal exhaled slowly, the tension in his body loosening. He knelt again, running his hands over Buddy's fur to check once more that he was all right. The dog licked his cheek, his tail wagging hesitantly. "It's okay, boy," Jamal whispered. "They won't hurt you again." For the first time in a long while, Jamal felt the weight of silence lift from his shoulders. He had always chosen peace, always walked away, but today he had defended what mattered most. He hadn't done it for pride or revenge, he had done it for Buddy, for the bond they shared. As he stood, leading Buddy away from the park, Jamal knew things would never be the same. The boys had seen his strength, and word would spread. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he did know one thing: he was no longer invisible. The quiet boy had revealed the truth hidden beneath his silence. And the world had finally seen the fighter within. The park fell into silence after the boys disappeared. Jamal stood still for a moment, his body finally loosening after the tension of the fight. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the rush of energy that had flowed through him. He looked down at Buddy, who sat beside him, panting softly. "Come on, boy," Jamal whispered, his voice gentle. "Let's go home." Buddy wagged his tail, though his steps were slower than usual. Jamal kept the leash short and walked carefully, his eyes scanning his dog's body again and again. Every time Buddy stumbled, Jamal's chest tightened. He bent down, rubbing the dog's side gently. "You'll be all right. I won't let anyone hurt you again." The streets felt different now. The same houses stood where they always had, the same trees lined the sidewalks, but Jamal walked taller. He wasn't trying to hide. He wasn't hurrying with his head down. For once, he walked with a sense of calm strength. Yet his mind kept circling back to the look on the boys' faces, the shock, the disbelief, and finally the hesitation when they realized he was not the person they thought he was. When he reached home, he crouched beside Buddy again and checked him carefully. The dog whimpered when Jamal pressed lightly on one paw, but soon licked his face as if to say, "Don't worry, I'm still here." Jamal hugged him close, burying his face in the soft fur. Inside, his uncle was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of cooked rice and vegetables filled the air. He looked up as Jamal entered with Buddy. "You're back later than usual," his uncle said calmly, though his eyes quickly noticed Jamal's serious expression. "Something happened?" Jamal hesitated. He didn't want to worry his uncle, but he also knew he couldn't hide the truth. He told the story slowly, his voice steady, describing how the boys had stepped in his way, how they had stomped near Buddy, and how he had defended himself. He left out nothing. His uncle listened quietly, his face unreadable. When Jamal finished, silence filled the room. Finally, his uncle spoke. "Did you fight with anger?" Jamal shook his head firmly. "No, I only moved when they pushed first. I didn't want to, but they hurt Buddy. I couldn't just stand there." His uncle's stern expression softened into something close to pride. He placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "Then you did what was right. Remember, our training is never to harm, but to protect. You protected your friend. That is strength used in the right way." Jamal exhaled slowly, the weight on his chest easing a little. His uncle's approval meant more than anything else. That night, after Buddy ate and curled up on his blanket, Jamal lay awake in his bed. His mind replayed the day over and over, the laughter, the cruelty, the look on the boys' faces when they realized he wasn't weak. He thought about how different things might be from now on. The next morning, whispers had already begun to spread. At school, Jamal noticed eyes following him more than usual. In the hallway, two boys from his class whispered to each other and glanced at him with surprise. He caught fragments of their words. "Did you hear what he did? They say he took them down." Jamal kept his head steady, but inside he felt a mix of discomfort and quiet pride. He had never asked for attention, never wanted to be the center of stories. But this time, the story was different. It wasn't about him being quiet or invisible. It was about him standing strong. During lunch, a classmate who had never spoken to him before slid into the seat across from him. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "About what happened at the park?" Jamal paused. He didn't know how to answer. Finally, he said, "I just did what I had to do." The girl studied him for a moment, then gave a small smile. "Well, good for you." She walked away, leaving Jamal surprised. For once, the silence around him felt less lonely. That afternoon, as he walked home with Buddy, a neighbor waved from her porch. She was an older woman who usually only nodded politely. This time, she called out, "I heard what happened yesterday. You're a brave young man." Jamal blinked in surprise, then gave a small nod of thanks. He didn't feel brave. He felt like he had simply done what any loyal friend would have done. But hearing those words warmed something inside him. Even so, not everyone reacted with kindness. The group of boys he had faced at the park hadn't disappeared. He caught sight of them from a distance 2 days later, huddled together near the convenience store. When they saw him, their laughter stopped. They didn't approach him, but the way they stared told him the story wasn't over. They wouldn't forget what happened. Jamal's uncle noticed his thoughtful expression that evening. "You're thinking about them," he said. Jamal nodded. "They won't just let it go." His uncle's eyes were calm. "Perhaps not. But you must not live in fear of what they might do. You already showed them who you are. They may test you again, but you must remember you are not the same as them. You are not cruel. You are not careless. You are disciplined. And discipline will always outlast recklessness." Jamal carried those words with him. He repeated them silently whenever worry tried to take root. He realized now that strength wasn't only about fighting, it was about how you carried yourself afterward, how you chose to walk through the world once others knew what you were capable of. In the evenings, he took Buddy on longer walks. He no longer avoided the park. He walked the same path, head held higher, with Buddy trotting beside him. The first time he did, he felt his chest tighten, half expecting the boys to appear again. But when he reached the basketball court and found it empty, relief washed through him. Buddy barked happily, pulling on the leash toward the grass. Jamal smiled. "See? We belong here too." Step by step, Jamal began to realize that the fight had changed more than just the way others saw him. It had changed the way he saw himself. For years, he had carried his silence like armor, afraid to let anyone see what was beneath it. Now, that armor felt lighter. He wasn't invisible anymore. And though the shadows of conflict still lingered, he no longer felt small beneath them. The quiet boy who had walked with his head down was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, not because of his fists, but because of his courage to defend what mattered most. As the sun set and Jamal returned home with Buddy, his uncle waited on the porch. The older man's eyes softened when he saw them together. "How was your walk?" he asked. "Good," Jamal said simply, his hand resting on Buddy's head. And for the first time in a long while, he truly meant it. The days that followed carried a different rhythm for Jamal. He still woke up early, still tied his sneakers, and still walked Buddy through the quiet streets each morning. But there was something new in the way he moved, something steady and strong that others began to notice. Neighbors who once passed him without a word now offered nods or greetings. A boy from his school even waved one afternoon, something that had never happened before. Jamal was surprised each time, but he returned the gestures quietly, never seeking attention, only acknowledging it. Buddy healed quickly. Within a few days, his steps were normal again, and his bark was as lively as ever. Still, Jamal kept a close eye on him, watching for any sign of discomfort. He couldn't forget the sound of that frightened whimper in the park, and it made him all the more protective. Each time Buddy ran ahead on the leash, Jamal smiled with relief. His dog's energy was proof that he had kept his promise, to protect, no matter what. At school, the whispers continued. Students who had once overlooked him now spoke his name in low voices, their eyes flicking toward him with curiosity or respect. Some said he was a fighter, others that he was dangerous. Jamal didn't like those words. He didn't want to be known as someone who caused fear. One afternoon, as he packed his books into his bag, his teacher called him over. "Jamal," she said kindly, "I don't know the full story of what happened, but I want you to know I'm proud of how you carry yourself. You've always been respectful, hardworking, and thoughtful. Don't let anyone change that." Her words sank deep. He realized then that what mattered wasn't what rumors painted him to be, it was how he chose to act each day. That evening, Jamal sat on the porch with his uncle. The air was cool, and Buddy lay stretched out beside them, his head resting on Jamal's shoe. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple as the sun sank low. "You've been quiet," his uncle said, sipping his tea. "Something on your mind?" Jamal hesitated, then spoke. "People look at me differently now. At school. In the neighborhood. Some act like they respect me, but others seem afraid." His uncle nodded slowly. "That is the weight of strength. When people see power, they respond in different ways. Some admire it, some fear it, and some try to test it. That's why it matters how you use it." Jamal frowned. "But I don't want people to think I'm dangerous." His uncle leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "Then show them you're not. Show them that your strength is not in hurting but in protecting. A true fighter is not one who defeats others, it is one who lifts others up, who inspires trust, not fear." Jamal looked down at Buddy, who gazed up at him with calm eyes. His uncle's words reminded him of the bond he had with his dog, the loyalty, the kindness, the unspoken promise to always stand together. If he could show that same loyalty to others, maybe they would see the truth about him. The next week gave him a chance. During lunch at school, he noticed a younger student struggling to pick up books that had spilled across the floor. A few kids walked past without helping, but Jamal stepped forward, kneeling to gather the books. He handed them back quietly, offering a small smile. The younger boy's face lit up with relief. "Thanks," he whispered. It was a simple act, but word spread quickly. Soon, people didn't just whisper about the fight at the park, they whispered about Jamal helping others, about the quiet strength that came not from his fists, but from his actions. Even the group of older boys didn't return to bother him. When he saw them again from a distance, they glanced his way but didn't approach. Their laughter was quieter, and their steps turned in the opposite direction. Jamal didn't chase them. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been given. One Saturday, his uncle took him to the training yard behind their house. "You've grown," his uncle said, handing him a pair of practice sticks. "But growth does not stop. Show me what you've learned." They sparred under the fading light of the evening, Jamal's movements sharper and more confident than ever before. His uncle nodded with approval after each exchange. When they finished, sweat on their brows, his uncle placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have the heart of a protector, Jamal. Never forget that." That night, as Jamal lay in bed with Buddy curled up at his feet, he thought deeply about those words. He realized now that strength was not a burden, it was a gift. But it was also a responsibility. The world would always test him in different ways, but he had the power to choose how to respond. He could choose anger, or he could choose patience. He could choose to fight recklessly, or he could choose to protect with honor. The next morning, Jamal took Buddy on their longest walk yet. They passed through the park, past the basketball court, and into the open field where children played. Some of the kids waved at him, and he waved back. He even threw a ball for a group of them when it rolled too far from their game. For the first time, Jamal felt like he wasn't standing outside of life looking in, he was part of it. Buddy ran beside him, barking joyfully. Jamal laughed, a sound so rare it surprised even him. The laughter felt good, light and free. As the sun climbed higher, Jamal slowed and looked around. The same town, the same streets, the same people, but everything felt different now. Not because the world had changed, but because he had. He wasn't the boy who walked with his head down anymore. He wasn't invisible. He wasn't powerless. He was someone who had stood up, defended what mattered, and learned that true strength was not about fists or fear, it was about loyalty, kindness, and courage. Walking home, Jamal glanced at Buddy and smiled. "It's just you and me, boy," he said softly. "But maybe, it's more than just us now." Buddy wagged his tail, as if agreeing. And so, Jamal carried himself into the future not as the quiet boy others once overlooked, not as the fighter who shocked the bullies, but as a young man who had discovered something greater. Strength beyond violence. Strength in love, in loyalty, in the quiet courage to keep walking forward no matter what.